Following the brutal murder of Rome's dictator in perpetuum, Gaius Julius Caesar, his assassins, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, burst through the doors of the Curia attached to the theatre of Pompeius, along with the rest of the Senate, many of whom were fleeing for their lives. Brandishing blood-soaked weapons and leaving a trail of their own blood, having inadvertently slashed one another in their crazed frenzy, the assassins converged with a small army of gladiators Decimus Junius Brutus had positioned next door. Tucked safely within these gladiators, the assassins placed a conical-shaped cap worn by freedmen atop a pole and marched to Clivus Capitolinus or Capitoline Hill, proclaiming loudly that Caesar, the tyrant, was now dead and that Rome was free once more. Some Caesarian senators, seizing the opportunity to align themselves with the new power, rushed towards Caesar's corpse. As some Caesarian senators fled the Curia, these senators bathed their hands in Caesar's blood, then hurriedly picked up discarded daggers in order to join the assassins' march through the streets. Caesar's Magister Equitum, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, among those Caesarian senators who bolted from the Curia, rushed to Tiber Island. After informing the legion encamped there of Caesar's murder, Lepidus immediately mobilized his forces. As the assassins marched toward Capitoline Hill, Lepidus marched legions, who were now hungry to avenge the death of Caesar, onto the Campus Martius, where they paused to await the arrival of the consul, Marcus Antonius. But Marcus Antonius, having witnessed the scene as senators flooded out from the Curia, spattered in blood, brandishing daggers, and shouting that the tyrant was dead, quietly vanished and barricaded himself within his home. From there, we are told that he concocted plans to sneak out of Rome disguised as a slave. As Marcus Junius Brutus led Caesar's assassins through the streets, proclaiming Rome's freedom from tyranny, the Roman people neither applauded nor praised them. Instead, most ran to their own homes in fear. Without cheering crowds grateful to the assassins to spur them on, the angry senators who had decided amongst themselves what was best for the entire nation soon lost confidence. So Brutus and the other assassins quickly posted a perimeter of gladiators atop Clivus Capitolinus. From there, Brutus sought desperately to speak to those Roman people still loitering in the streets, shouting assurances that a second Brutus had once again saved Rome from tyranny and that the Republic was restored. Senators who had not been involved in the plot now attempted to support Brutus and Cassius. Lucius Cornelius Cinna, once the brother-in-law of Caesar and one of Caesar's appointments to the office of praetor for the 44 BC year, threw off the toga bearing the insignia of his office, declaring ostentatiously that it had been bestowed on him by a tyrant. Even Publius Cornelius Dolabella, a favorite of Caesar's and previously scheduled to take up Caesar's vacant consulship when the dictator departed for Illyricum, proclaimed the assassination was honorable, shouting that he'd had advanced knowledge of the plot. But the people's response was not what the assassins expected or wanted. Regardless of how the citizenry felt about Caesar's accumulation of power, the dictator for life had brought them a sense of peace and stability in the wake of Rome's ongoing state of civil war, which had lasted for decades. As Marcus Antonius made preparations to leave the city, he was visited by delegates on behalf of the assassins, who had also invited Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, stationed with his legions on the Campus Martius, to meet for negotiations. Once Lepidus joined them at the home of Antonius, the delegation formally announced that the death of Caesar was not a power grab by Marcus Junius Brutus, Gaius Cassius Longinus, nor any of the conspirators who had been a party to the plot. The sole intent had been the removal of a tyrant who had taken from Rome her freedoms. The assassins offered Marcus Antonius and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus an opportunity to work together with them to restore Rome's republican traditions. Antonius and Lepidus agreed to consider the proposal, assuring the delegates they'd arrive at some type of agreement on the 17th of March, once they'd considered the sentiment of all the senators currently in Rome. With a meeting of the Senate now scheduled, Brutus, Cassius, and several other assassins, waiting until dark, discreetly visited the homes of key senators within the city, hoping to win their support regarding the assassination of Caesar. However, as the assassins crept from home to home, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus was stealthily shifting his legion from the Campus Martius into the city, and under cover of darkness took up occupation in the Forum Romanum. As Lepidus poised his legions to take control of the city, Marcus Antonius visited the home of Caesar, where his body had been taken for funeral preparations. The bereaved Calpurnia, who had been Caesar's wife at sunrise and his widow at sunset, released all of Caesar's private correspondence to Marcus Antonius, including laws and reforms, lists of governmental appointments, and even the papers discovered on Caesar's person. Among these papers was the note that had been passed to Caesar by a seemingly anonymous stranger as he had journeyed to his death. The note, which Caesar had nonchalantly tucked inside his toga, contained names and details of the plot which had already come to pass. In addition to handing over Caesar's business papers, Calpurnia also released control of Caesar's funds to Antonius, signaling that the widow of Caesar deemed Marcus Antonius to be her late husband's political heir and the new leader of the Caesarian party. The March 17th Senate meeting was held on Esquiline Hill, within the sanctuary temple dedicated to the goddess Tellus. But when Brutus and Cassius saw armed soldiers stationed around the temple, they cautiously opted not to attend the meeting and instead sent representatives, including Marcus Tullius Cicero, to advocate on their behalf. During the meeting, the Senate appeared divided between those who supported the assassins, those who opposed them, and those who simply wanted to forge peace. Supporters of the assassins argued that Caesar was a tyrant, pointing out that he had arrested 2 tribunes of the plebs, whose person was legally sacrosanct. They motioned that the Senate publicly thank the assassins for their courageous service in ridding Rome of a tyrant. But Marcus Antonius responded by reminding them that a consul of Rome and legally appointed dictator, whose person was also inviolable, had not simply been arrested, but murdered. Antonius then read the list of laws, reforms, and governmental appointments which Caesar had legislated, all of which had to be discarded should Caesar be named tyrant. Not old enough to legally hold the consulship apart from Caesar's authority, Publius Cornelius Dolabella, who had desperately tried to align himself with the assassins, suddenly condemned them for the murder of Caesar. If Caesar's laws were rescinded, so was Dolabella's consulship. Caesar's legions, Antonius pointed out, would not be pleased to hear the Senate thanking the murderers of the man who had legislated on their behalf retirement plans and land on which to settle. Nor would the legions, who were now within the city limits, be happy to have their retirement plans eradicated under the Senate's definition of tyranny. With Clivus Capitolinus occupied by the gladiator army of the assassins, the Forum Romanum occupied by Caesar's legions under the command of Lepidus, and Antonius now threatening the Senate, Marcus Tullius Cicero felt, at that moment, that there remained only one avenue for any hope of peace in Rome. The father of the Republic moved that Caesar not be named tyrant, and that all of his legislation, which was extremely popular with the people and beneficial to Rome's stability, be ratified by the Senate. In exchange for the ratification of Caesar's laws and reforms, the Senate would pardon his assassins, granting them full immunity from prosecution. Perceiving this to be the only way of moving forward without launching yet another war, all the parties agreed. But when the news was delivered to Brutus and Cassius on Capitoline Hill, they feared the Senate's decision was a trap, and that they would be executed as soon as they surrendered the hill. To guarantee their personal security, they insisted on taking hostages before coming down from Clivus Capitolinus. Marcus Aemilius Lepidus and Marcus Antonius each were required to give over their sons to Brutus and Cassius as an assurance. Marcus Antonius was forced to deliver up his almost 3-year-old son by his wife Fulvia until the assassins were back safely inside their homes. Lucius Cornelius Cinna, who had made such a great show of solidarity with those who had murdered Caesar, was seen coming out of the Senate meeting, wearing the same toga he had dramatically thrown to the ground, disparaging it as the gift of a tyrant. The people became outraged over his hypocrisy and began throwing rocks and stones at him. This angry crowd then pursued Cinna all the way to his home, where they tried to set his house on fire. Cinna was saved from being burned alive by Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, who sent his legions to disperse the crowd surrounding Cinna's home. Within the home of Calpurnia, Several Caesarians, including Antonius and Lepidus, gathered for a private reading of Caesar's will. From his personal fortune, Caesar had gifted every male citizen approximately 3 months' worth of wages, in addition to donating one of his estates. This property, which sat across the Tiber River, was to be converted into a public park for the people of Rome. Marcus Antonius, who likely hoped that he had exchanged the support of Rome's city plebs for a place in Caesar's will, would have been devastated to learn this night that Caesar had named as his primary heir a blood relative. Apart from his bequests to the people of Rome, 75% of Caesar's fortune went to Gaius Octavius, the grandson of Caesar's sister. The remaining 25% of Caesar's fortune was to be divided between Quintus Pedius and Lucius Pinarius, the grandsons of Caesar's other sister. If at the time of Caesar's death his primary heirs had predeceased him, the will stated Caesar's fortune was then to be divided by his secondary heirs, Marcus Antonius, and the very man who had led Caesar like a lamb to the slaughter, Decimus Junius Brutus. But the real revelation in Caesar's will was his posthumous adoption of a son to carry on his name. In addition to being the recipient of Caesar's vast fortune, the 19-year-old Gaius Octavius inherited the now politically invaluable name of Caesar.